Welcome back to Cade Sport, the virtual cycling platform that invites you, dear viewer, to stop pedaling and start cycling. So you're joined here today by me, Mark, as I navigate you through a fast Thursday of rip-roaring races live. Speaking of, where are we racing today? Well, we're going to begin with our all-road, all-power course. 4.2 kilometers per lap for a 3 kilometer total of 12.6 Ks. One of my absolute favorite maps on Cade Sport, Lake Bend. Big power for a climber like me. So let's see who's going to take the cherry on that one. That's going to be the 2x multiplier today. How about for race 2? Well, that's going to be Cade Kart, the nice, vicious technical cornering indoors with some drifting difficulty for our riders today. That's going to be 3 laps of 0.7 kilometers or 700 meters per lap for a 2 kilometer total. One-time multiplier only. And the one that's really going to be the upsetter today for the scoreboard is going to be Vixen, so called because, as you can see, it looks like the shape of a fox's face. And it's going to be 2 laps of 5 kilometers per for a 10 kilometer total. Lots of climbing here as well, and very, very difficult cornering and cornering challenges, you could say as well. The big 3x multiplier, so the one that is really going to separate the men from the boys, the wheat from the chaff. So, being the all-road, all-power course, race 1 does not have any power-ups. However, race 2 has refillable or unlimited uncrashable. That means that riders can use this whenever they feel like, but that comes with a caveat that it takes 2 minutes to recharge for only a 10-second usage time. So that one's going to be difficult for sure. Race 3 is going to see 4 times of corner caper, 10 seconds usage time, 90-second recharge time, and Razor's Edge unlimited again. However, again with that caveat of a 90-second recharge time and a 10-second usage time. So without any further ado, let's jump on over to Lake Bend. So here we are, we're in the starting gates. Got a lot of familiar names here today. And we are off. So we've got Frank off the front there. Straight away, Alfonso in chase, Zeb in chase. Looks like we've got a great peloton forming here. Absolutely fantastic stuff. So I believe it's Zeb and Frank, and there's somebody else there on the front. Is that Alfonso? Taking the charge as well. An interesting fight between these two contenders. Both on their tri-bikes, they're getting that aero benefit from the aero position and the narrower 25mm tires. Both holding pretty good power resistance. Maybe Frank's got a little bit more optimal performance to power ratio. Martin here in good chase, as well as Erhan. So we had Frank and Alfonso beginning to make a big separation there, a big push as they break away, but it looks like a peloton is reforming. Fantastic power there from Erhan as he's catching up, closing that gap, as is Carl Axel. We can form that peloton, get that draft benefit, and begin to work on easing up, perhaps lowering away from the maximal heart rate, and then really pushing for some good performance as they get through. So there we go, we've got Alfonso on the screen, Zeb and Erhan as well. Everyone's looking nice and rested at the moment, but let's see how that changes as everyone gets closer to their optimals, their maximals, and as they go over threshold. Whoa, who's this? Is this Jeff again? Who I believe is on couch power mode, but is absolutely using that to his advantage to really taunt the other players here. I believe Jeff is injured, which is why he's on the couch power mode at the moment. Martin from Denmark. So we've got the Central European crew here. We've got Zeb and Martin pushing ahead. Alfonso still has a sizable gap. But again, it looks like we're doing the old elastic band here where we're stretching out and then beginning to, once it snaps back, beginning to reform into that peloton again. So then we've got Jeff from New Zealand, probably drinking some LNP, whatever New Zealand cultural oddities can I think of? None off the top of my head, which is embarrassing because I lived there for a while. So Erhan here is definitely well rested today, putting in some good power to make moves forward. Looking absolutely great over threshold, which again, because we are in the pro power mode, is 421 watts is the baseline of threshold. So we've got Frank here with Shaq and Vanessa. So the CadeSport team is beginning to reform. I think the only team that has more than one member on screen today, or in race I should say, sorry. But we do have representatives of various teams. So at the moment, Alfonso is beginning to hold a bit of a gap going into the gentle parts of the climbs here. But let's see what happens. I know from being more of a powerful climber myself that once you begin to wear yourself out, that's when those other riders will begin to catch up, which is what we're seeing here. The trick being to know when you can match your optimal cadence and perhaps drop it back so you don't overexert when you reach the pinnacle, the zenith, if you will, of the climb. I'm loving that single color black and white effect on Martin's webcam there. That looks fantastic. Again, everyone's looking pretty good right now. Pretty good effort coming out of Erhan, Zeb and Martin. So that looks pretty good right now. So everyone's keeping nice rhythm, perhaps knowing where their cadence to power ratio is and keeping that somewhat stable. So beginning to see this elastic band effect keep coming into quite stark focus where, again, the peloton is stretching apart and then as it snaps back, reforming again. So I'm wondering if this is going to have an effect on the sprints for the final lap, because again we saw that happen just as we crossed the finish line of lap 1 there. Great rhythm as always on Zeb, keeping a nice rhythm with those body movements as well, keeping nice and comfortable, which is all important when you're anchored on as solid and as straight upright as you are on a direct drive smart trainer. That's a fantastic way to keep yourself comfortable in the saddle for a longer period of time. Having done a solo ride of 12 hours where I did 354 kilometers in that ride, a question that comes up is how do you stay comfortable on something like a direct drive smart trainer when you're doing that kind of distance? And it is to actually have a bit of movement on your body. Staying stable on the bike is going to be something like, is this Jeff? Hey Jeff. Good to see you. I hope that recovery is quick. It doesn't look like the least painful thing I've ever seen, I will say that. So I'm hoping that you're in a spot where you're feeling well rested and that recovery can take good effect. Oh, sorry, yeah, to finish my thought there, I was going to say that keeping the body moving is a good thing to stay comfortable and settle for longer when you're as stable and as rock steady as you are on a direct drive smart trainer. Obviously, you don't want to do that too much outside because you can become a bit wobbly, maybe, unless you're at your optimal point of that kind of sweet spot between your optimal cadence and power output. And even then, you don't want to wobble too much. That's maybe where you want to stay stable, except for when you're getting out of the saddle. But indoors, you do want to kind of maybe rock a little bit. Make sure that your bike is fitted correctly to the smart trainer, though, if you're going to rock about, because I did that once. As I pushed down on the pedals, obviously it pulls the chain forward, the derailleur moved up and it lifted out of the thing, and I smacked into the wall as I tipped to the right. Not a fun experience. So we are seeing again, the elastic band coming into full effect here. Martin staying very strong on the front, which doesn't surprise me. He can hold that optimal top end of threshold for as long as you can imagine. And we've got Frank here, CEO of Cyclogent, the company behind Cade Sport, holding very stable in place there, really good power, considering that this is on the slight downhill where you would normally be a little bit spun out. So I'm assuming a very high tension gear to be able to continue with a little bit of pedaling there. It's not the sharpest of downhill, so you can still pedal. And Erhan beginning to catch up to the back of the peloton. So maybe shift up a gear and knees up without sprinting, because you'll burn yourself out, and then you might be able to catch it in about 3 seconds maybe. I love these wonderful drone shots and helicopter shots provided by our wonderful live vision mixer, Damon. And there we've got Damon live on that huge and actually a little bit intimidating array. A very consummate professional to navigate that, I'm sure. So we've got Frank catching up here, Zeb catching up. This is where we're seeing Zeb put out the real power and begin to hold into that draft benefit, which should get the riders in front of him, Martin and Alfonso, of whom he's holding the draft benefit from, a little bit nervous because Zeb can just wait there, ready for the moment to pounce. So the elastic band snapping back into its resting form, if you will, as the peloton comes back together. End of the second lap. And again, seems to be right around the end of the lap. So I like to describe this every time. If you watch this live every time, it must be a little bit boring for you, but I apologize, but I like to describe it for anybody who is watching for the first time today. We are in the Pro Power mode, which is powered by Cade Sport's patented Together Tech. The idea of how that works is that if you were separated from your friends in another virtual cycling platform by categories, race categories, and the such, well, you can ride together again here on Cade Sport. How does it work? Well, you put out at least 20 minutes, ideally an hour, of riding for a solo ride or a non-race ride, let's say, and the system in the Pro Power mode is going to crunch your numbers. The algorithm will look at your numbers and find out where your FTP is, your functional or full threshold power. In other words, where you can hold an optimal output for the longest. it will take that number and it will crunch it down to 421 watts. And that is for everybody will be 421 watts, regardless of how their functional threshold power may differ from person to person. This means that at threshold or just below, at what I like to call the sweet spot, 15 to 20% below, you can ride together. That also means that riders who really want to win today are going to have to push beyond threshold in sprints maybe to really get the most out of their distance and speed on those final sprints. Again, as Frank says though, power isn't everything. On these all-road, all-power courses where it's relative flats, maybe, yes, you want to be looking at power in sprints, but it certainly changes in the next two courses we get into. So we've got Shaq on the front today for the Cade Sport team. We've got Martin in hot pursuit, Zeb in hot pursuit. So we're seeing some really solid power numbers here. Everyone over threshold. Martin, Zeb, Erhan, beginning to see those pain faces come in. Some really solid exertion there. That's what you like to see. Alfonso falling a little bit behind, but keeping solid distance on that pace between himself and the front group or attack group or whatever you wish to call that front peloton there. Very impressive from Shaq here on the climb. The downhill can change everything though, so let's see how this goes. Again, it's only a few percent maybe on that downhill at most. Solid rhythm on everyone. I think this is the first time I've ever seen Alfonso a little bit pained on the bike. But still looking as cool as ever, so, you know, you can't argue with that. Very, very stable power from Shaq there, even on the downhill. So again, high tension gear and pedaling through that without over pedaling is what I presume is happening there. It's one of those things of feeling that you're in a high enough tension gear to feel the pedal stroke not essentially speed away from you on the downward push of the stroke as your foot goes forward. And again, you can't do that on too steep of a downhill because you'll just spin out and it will cause you to wobble in the outside world. And here we go, I told you this is where we see Zeb come in for the attack and begin to get his position all queued up. So let's see what happens here. Martin as well pushing forward, as is Frank and Carl. Whoa, look at the sprint from Frank. Absolutely fantastic stuff. The animation of the cadence is reflected. Oh wow, Shaq crashed out there. Not sure what happened there. So yeah, the cadence animation is reflective of the real world cadence being put in as long as you have a cadence meter. So that shows you the kind of pedal strokes that are going into it. And I believe that was Frank. Oh, with a number of crashes right after the finish line, but luckily they were after that finish line. Oh. I must admit that's entertaining to watch. So yeah, let's take a look at this leaderboard. So yeah, it was Frank by, what that be, 1,000th of a second over Martin, and Carl 4,000ths of a second. No, I'm going the wrong way. 800ths of a second, 700ths of a second behind Carl, and then Zeb is half a second behind Frank, and Shaq rounded out the top 5, 12 seconds behind. So that is very solid, very close to each other. And like I said, that elastic band began to come back together there, or began to come back together, I should say, as we got into that final furlong of that final lap. So what does that do for our scoreboard? Well, of course, Frank is in the lead right now with 60 points because this is our 2 times multiplier, not the free. And we have Martin second, 52. Carl in third place with 46. Zeb with 42 in fourth place. And Shaq, 38, rounded out the top 3. However, now we're getting into the technical courses that are going to really change things and perhaps bring in some sizable upsets. So let's see what happens as we get into our indoor technical course, Cade Car. While we are waiting for the map to load, I will just mention that I do really enjoy seeing those Velo Viewer elevation profiles, something that I'm sure every road rider and mountain biker loves. Something that really lets you know what you're up against with climbs. I very much like to know that in advance for both the virtual world and outdoors. I remember riding a 15% with my dad, and actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It did help that I was using a Di2 electric shift assistance. So that's not an electric bike, that is a muscle bike, if you will, but it is the shift assistance. But that was one where knowing in advance what I was up against really gets you in the right mindset for it. All right, we're off, and got Frank on the front there using his uncrashable to get through this very tight chicane that comes up early on here, as is Pedro, sorry. So Pedro's joining us for race 2. Oh, wow, a number of crashes there. So we do have steer collision as well as object and cornering collision as well in game here in Cade Sport. And how do you do the navigation of steering and power-ups? Well, you can do that with the Co-app, the companion app, which once you get the game, once you get Cade Sport and you open it up in the root menu there, you just open your smartphone and scan it with your camera, or sorry, I should specify, you scan a QR code with your camera, which takes you to a mobile-only website, the benefit of which is that A, it doesn't track you, and B, it's a lot data light compared to an app. As you can see there, it's a gyroscope-based system, so you mount your smartphone onto your handlebars via a handlebar mount, so you can steer. You also have the brake button. The longer you hold that, the more of a percentile it brakes by, e.g. dampening your brakes out in the real world. You also get your buttons in there for triggering your power-ups, but you also don't have to use it in-game. You have the Browse Unconnected feature, which you can go into to schedule yourself into activities that are coming up and to go into your social functions such as adding friends or accepting friend requests. So we've got Zeb here in the front, which really doesn't surprise me. A graveler mountain bike rider who is, of course, skilled at all of that technical cornering, technical descents, and all of those fun things, which comes into full play here. Oh, that saving of that drifting out from both Carl and Zeb was incredibly impressive. Just hitting that full brake just in time to save from hitting the barrier, or a little bit of over or maybe even understeering there from Frank, caused a little bit of a steering collision. So we've got Zeb there on the hoods out of the saddle, putting in the power as he comes through and out of this corner. There we go, getting into the straight where we're going to put the power down. Fantastic stuff. Textbook riding. So I believe we're coming into our final lap here. So really it can be anyone's game right now between Carl and Zeb, but it could be anybody's game at all, because there are still very tight chicanes like this one, which is a particularly nasty one. And some nasty descents into corners as well. An absolutely fantastic map that's been designed by the team at Cade Sport, but a vicious one nonetheless. Which is just evidenced right there, perhaps by the commentator's curse with Frank. So Carl's really pushing into, through, I should say, and out of this corner. Really hoping to get that lead against Zeb, which it looks like currently he's got a 14-second lead. So with 100 meters left, I think this is pretty much Carl's race. I'm wondering if Zeb suffered a crash off screen there. And there we go. Carl just flies through that. Oh, maybe a little bit of tunnel vision there, powering into a corner. But it looks like Zeb, nonetheless, is going to quite handily take second place. And here we go with Frank, looking really nice and stable, coming through these final corners. And yeah, nice and stable coming in for third place. And here comes Vanessa. So we've got two Cade Sport riders there. And Erhan as well, just easily crossing that finish line. Alfonso too. So let's take a look at our leaderboard as the final riders cross those finish lines. So yeah, Carl holding a very stable 12 seconds, but considering that got up to a 17-second gap at one point, Zeb putting a lot of power to eat away at that time gap. And then beyond that, another 22 seconds, 22 and a half seconds behind Zeb is Frank. Jeff in the couch power mode, 39 seconds behind Carl. Vanessa rounded out the top 5, 45 seconds behind. So let's take a quick peek at what that does to our score tally. So yeah, with it being only a one-time multiplier, that means Frank stays in the lead for now, 83 points. Carl has moved up to second place, 76 points. Zeb, 68 for third place. Martin, 66.5. And Jeff rounded out the top 5 at 55 points. But the next race is going to be the one that changes everything, at least in theory. And that is going to be Vixen, a course that from an aerial view does look like the shape of a fox's head and face. I can say with some certainty that the tips of those ears are going to be pretty nasty, because that appears to be an uphill cornering straight into a descent, and then the base of that descent is also another corner. So that's not going to be the most fun. And again, this is our 3 times multiplier, 125 meters of climbing. I believe for feet you'd times in that by 2.9, so almost 3 times, so that would be 350-ish, a little bit shy of that feet. We're off straight into a corner. Luckily it is a somewhat flowing corner, so that's not going to be the worst yet. Now remember, there was some caveat to our power-ups here. I believe it's that we only have 4 of the corner capers, where that's certainly going to mean that our caders, our contenders, are going to need to be very picky and choosy about where they use those. And the weight lifted is unlimited, but of course is only 10 seconds and has that 90-second recharge time. The other thing with weight lifted is that it's essentially, its effect is to make you as razor thin as like a razor blade or something like that, so that you just cut through the air, which means that your power goes up as well as your speed as well. So in other words, you have no air resistance. But there are a limited number of straights on here where riders are going to want to really choose where they utilize those, I'm sure. Because also dampening off that speed is going to take at least a couple of seconds. And I'm sure somebody's going to show us how expertly that's done. Wowee, people have to slow down a lot for these corners, these sharp corners. We've got John Sears, who joined us for race 2 and this race as well. John being a friend of Homer and Kay. Putting down very good power on the straights here, or whatever we have of straights today. There we go, dampening that speed, dampening the power. Expert right in there, John. So we've got Carl, we've got Zeb, and we've got Frank on the lead there. Carl using his weight lifted to be able to really push that power and that speed, mostly the speed. And we also have our recharges here that people can collect. So I did get that wrong on an earlier race. If you have enough slots for them, you can collect those to recharge the number of those power-ups you have. The number of power-ups that can be used and the slots that are available for them are set by the race leader, or the person who programs the race and schedules the race. So if you're in a team and you're setting up a race, that is something you can do in platform. Frank here really easing off for the corner. Great handling there. Great handling from all riders as they tackle that fairly tight chicane, like an S-bend chicane that we went through there. This will be nice, a nice gentle sweeping corner where power can be put down. But immediately coming into a tighter corner. Oh, this is catching everybody out. One of our bridges here, so this is one of our big climbing sections, as reflected in the power spike there that you can see on all of our riders coming up here. So Carl Axel using that weight lifted again on another straight here. I believe this is, I think we're still going uphill. So maintaining just a nice rhythm actually, that a little bit below threshold, but just nice rhythm to get up here. Oh, I did remember seeing Jeff there. I did remember something else about New Zealand, which is that fantastic and hilarious commercial. Don't let the mate drive drunk. Legend. Everybody has to Google that after this and watch it. It's hilarious. Spoon, Space Ed. Fantastic commercial. It's essentially a anti-drink driving PSA. And I believe it may have been directed by Taika Waititi. Frank putting in some solid power with that corner caper there, being passed by the eponymous Jeff. Andy in a pretty good chase here against catching up to Frank, catching that rear wheel. Homer there staying very stable on the climb. A little bit over threshold, but that's a very stable cadence as well. Again, seemingly knowing exactly where his optimal cadence to power ratio lies. Very stable power. And then as we're cresting off, that's only the point where he's dropping the power there. So really great riding. Coming into this tight corner, which luckily is on the climb, which means handling is a bit more easy to do. It's just keeping that stable cadence on the climb is just the more difficult thing, maybe. So we are with Carl here, putting in some very solid power on the front. And on screen there we can see Alfonso, I think maybe Zeb's webcam is frozen. And we've got Erhan as well. Zeb there putting in some solid power, using the corner caper and the weight lifted both at once, which has given him some solid speed here going into this descent and tapering it off nicely. Again, textbook. Or Kursbuch, if we were to speak in Deutsch. So we've got Alfonso, Jeff and Erhan on screen here. Jeff expertly handling the couch power mode there. Frank in hot pursuit as well. A little bit over threshold, keeping a good cadence rhythm as well. So it looks like Carl has, what is that, a 14-second lead over Zeb, who is in hot pursuit, but it looks like Zeb is closing that gap slowly but surely. We've got just under 4 kilometers here, and we've got our first person view from Carl as he's easing up on the power, easing up on the speed, and easily cresting that corner. Another fantastic camera shot provided by Damon. Solid power on the climb, and I can't remember if this is one of our really tight corners coming up on that climb. I think this may even be the ear that we are on, one of the ears. And I love the fact that we do have a fox off screen there, or sorry, off the course there by the side of the road, yapping at everyone as we pass. Just really add into the theme of the course. I don't think foxes are normally that personable. I believe they get a little bit skittish, but I'm told if they are that personable, you might be in trouble. Kind of like coyotes. in that sense. So we do have another broadcast coming up on Saturday, and you can sign up to race in it by downloading the game, downloading the app, and why not come and give it a try with us? You might find that you really enjoy it yourself. You can also watch these broadcasts live on the CadeSport Facebook page, the CadeSport YouTube channel, and any of the various broadcast methods of ESTV. Visit the ESTV website to find out the plethora of ways that you can watch and enjoy. So here we are live on board, if you will, looking through the very same eyes of Carl, or at least his digital avatar, on this quite aggressive climb. And I love how we get the kind of climbing wobble that you would get, you know, from experiencing that in real life. Very great realistic physics in game here in CadeSport. So 13-second lead. Zeb is beginning to chip away at that lead. So let's see what can happen here. Got 1.8 kilometers left. Maybe that gap can be closed in that time. Not certain. Admittedly, I can't really do that math on the top of my head. That would take me a while to figure that out. Fairly even pace power numbers though. So let's see what can happen here. So it does look like Zeb's web camera is frozen, which is unfortunate, but I'm sure he's giving it great guns in the real world, as he often does. "11 seconds, so Zeb is indeed chipping away at that. I got excited, then I saw a Canadian flag come up, and I was like, oh, finally! Another Canadian, and it's a bot. Because of course. So Frank here, holding very stable for third place. Getting on to the more graduated part of the climb here, which is to say the part of the climb that is going to perhaps be a little bit easier on the quads, certainly on the glutes. Look at that, another wonderful first-person view as we look out over that valley into the river there, lake. And using the weight lifted here for the climb, which is actually quite a clever way to do this. Lift your weight, it also means you can power up a climb easier. But yeah, that is the particularly aggressive part of the climb, which I believe means we're on the going up to the left eye of the fox, if you will. And nice, gentle, wide sweeping corners here, which means cautiously some power can be used. There's still places where drifting out can happen. Certainly some caution going in, because you're going into a downhill now, which is one of those things. Wow, Zeb really did eat up that gap, eat up that time. We're down to 5 seconds now, but it comes in just a tiny bit too late. But fantastic effort by Zeb there in just closing down that gap. That takes a lot of effort. That was probably going to maximal heart rate and stay in there to achieve that. And that is an effort that needs to be saluted for sure. So very stable here. Coming to cross the finish line with Jeff. So Frank just opens up that gap a little bit, rolling off the pedals there to be able to hold steady into these downhill corners. Now that I see these so close up, I actually take back everything I said about being able to put in some power cautiously, because I can see that it's actually all on a fairly aggressive downhill. So yeah, don't do that. And there we go, Frank easily takes that third place position. And Homer as well, very close behind. Great effort by Homer. And Vanessa keeping nice and stable here, coming in for that finish line. So we didn't see any Vibeke or any Timothy or any Ben from Team Hive today. But a lot of effort from the teams that were here and represented. And fantastic effort from all of the contenders here today in race. So as Vanessa and Shaq cross the finish line, let's take a look at that all-important leaderboard. So yeah, Zeb managed to eat that gap, which got as large as 17 seconds down to only 4.2 seconds. Frank is about 1 minute and 20 behind that for third place, and Jeff in fourth place, 1 minute and 25 behind Carl. And then we've got Homer rounding out the top 5 at almost 1 minute 30 behind Carl. So let's see what this has done to that all-important score tally. Well, here we go. I'm pretty sure that 46 on the front there is, yeah, that's Carl. So Carl has taken that 3 times multiplier to really jump up to that top spot. But Frank, staying in third, has managed to keep holding on to a podium place. Second place, Zeb comfortably taking a podium place, 146 points. Jeff just behind at 118, and Shaq at 101 to round out the top 5. Wow, just like I suspected, that third race did change everything. Well, thank you for joining us today. As I said, you can join us for that race live on Saturday. You can watch live on the CadeSport Facebook page, CadeSport YouTube channel, or any of the various broadcast methods from ESTV. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.